I saw this pointed out to you. This is your Bible when you're doing a flower show. It used to only be this big, and they enlarged it, and they said it was easier to read. Yeah, but try walking around judging a show lugging this thing under one arm. It's not fun. I have brought you some notes, partially based on this, partially based on my own experience, and I think I have enough for everyone. I have never gone over 2 pages before, front and back. We're on 2 sheets of paper this time. This is what you're doing it all for. This is a blue ribbon for a piece of horticulture. In this case, it was Iris siberiaca, butter and sugar. I got a nice blue ribbon for it, but that's all I got. However, in another show, I got this. Because when you have horticulture, you have sections. When you look at your schedule, you'll see sections. And this means you had the best piece, according to the judges, in your section. And the surprise of my life, and in one way I felt badly because it was down to 2 exhibits and I was up against my best friend in the flower show world. And this is the best piece of horticulture in the entire show. This is what we live for, right? Hey, I've been doing this for a long time. I got 1 of these, so luckily I have several of these, but only 1 of these. Okay, all right. That is my garden. This is a house that we moved into just 3 years ago, and I decided to have no grass whatsoever. I've got 1.5 acres of land, and because my property moves into wetlands and conservation land, everything on my property, with a few exceptions, a couple of hostas I love too much to live without, and some hellebores and things like that, what I call friendly natives. They're not going to become invasive. They don't hurt anything. Everything else on here is native, and I'm very proud of that. And now all I have to do is convince my show it really wants to go online. No, of course not. A few months ago, my computer literally died in the middle of writing something one day. And my husband went out and said, "Oh, this is a great computer, you're gonna love it." It's different than anyone I ever had, and I'm still not really happy with it. No, Neil went off to run an errand. We may do it without this. No, yay. I did this because it's going to be easier to see what I'm saying from this than what I'm saying. Okay. Prepping horticulture for a flower show is not much different than, really, in many ways, getting it ready to bring into your own home. So, thank you. Starting with the basics, and I'm starting with the very basics because your schedule says annuals, perennials, this, that. An annual, 1 growing season. That's it. It starts either from a seed or a seedling that you bought, and in that 1 season, it's going to grow to full size, produce fruit, produce seeds, which is the plant's whole goal in life is to produce seeds, and it's going to die. You can't keep it going. It's just going to die. A perennial lives more than 2 years. So it's not 1 season. It's going to go through at least 2 full seasons. Actually, it's going to go through more than 2. So you've got peonies and hostas, the ones that die down to the ground but come back and look great. And then there are the woody ones, trees, shrubs, vines, deciduous, meaning they drop their leaves, your maple tree, your lilac tree, or evergreen, your pine or your holly or your rhododendron, things that keep their leaves from 1 year to the next. Actually squeezed in between here are something called biennials. And you don't see them a lot in flower shows, but they should because they're some of my favorite. plants are also biennials. They are plants that start one season and don't finish until the next season. Anybody got one? I see you smiling. Come on. Pardon me? Foxglove's a great one. Garlic is another one. So, I mean, there are some great things that are biennials. They're harder for things to do. Anatomy. Why do I care about anatomy? Because it's very important. Stem. That is the leaf and the flower-bearing parts. So this is the stem of anybody know? It's a shrub. It's variegated. Leucothoe, yeah. This is the leaf. This is the stem. Here's a flower part up on the top tip. And the nodes are where the buds attach all the way along it. And that's important because there's at least one thing in your schedule that says must have X number of nodes. The leaf, that's the blade, that's that. And the petiole is that little piece of stem that holds a blade to the stem. That's important because if you take it off, you leave a spot and everybody will know you took it off. When the judges are looking for perfection, they don't want to see that. They want it to be perfect all the way up. And I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of things in bloom growing in my yard right now that I could cut. There's a strange reason. Okay, petiole, that's the stem of the leaf. Flower, the reproductive part, obviously. Here, these are the flowers. They're not in bloom yet, they will be soon. This, of course, is a Andromeda. One of the things I could cut. That's the reproductive part of the plant. The seeds will come out of that. That is the part you want the bees to visit, or sometimes the ants to visit, or sometimes the flies to visit, but you want somebody to visit that, mix the pollen into the right part, and produce the seeds. Maybe you don't really want the seeds, but it shows your plant went all the way through life. The peduncle is this part right here. It's this stem here that holds the flowers. Not really terribly important, but it's cute. Sepal, that is the leaf-like structure that protects the bud. So I don't have anything in bud, and I apologize for that. So, but you know, there's something around it, and that is important. And the petal are the conspicuously colored parts. Those are the petals. And this thing back here is the little kind of brownish part that looks like it's dry and dead, and you certainly want to rip it off before you put your flower in a flower show, right? No. That is the spathe. And the spathe on daffodils and calla lilies are always left on the plant when it's being shown as part of horticulture. It's never taken off. You take it off, your plant is going to get cut way down. So, okay, let's go on from here. Classification is tricky, and you always need a really good person at classification at your flower show, because people who really know what they're doing will still come in and say, this is my daffodil Mary Knight or May Knight. And they look at it and they go, okay, give me the whole family breakdown. Luckily, they will have books there. They will have computers there. And they will have people there who can help you with that. But you have to fill out this card. You have to do it. It's your job to fill out this card. My first recommendation is you get batches and batches of address labels in the mail. Bring some with you. It saves you writing out your name and address on every card you use. And it makes it really easy for the people in the show to know whose it is and how to get stuff back to you if they have to. But up here, you've got to write down the particulars. The division, horticulture is always division 2. Section depends on what's in the schedule. It's right there in front of you. They'll have lots of them there. the class, and then there's entry number, which you don't do anything to because they put that in. But you have to fill this card out. You are responsible for it. If this card's screwed up, it affects the judging on your plan. Now, there are people there who will help you, particularly with things like this. When you put in the family, it's got to be capitalized, not italicized. When you put in the genus, it's capitalized and underlined, or if you've typed it in, capitalized and italicized. Don't worry about that. They will make sure you get it right. You are responsible for knowing your entry's name. Don't bring this in and ask somebody, can you tell me what this is? I thought it was really pretty, but I don't know what it is. Because they can tell you probably the species. They might have a guess at the rest of it, but they don't know for real. And some of those judges, whoa, some of those judges know their horticulture so well, and they'll look, there's a wrong name on that. You might as well put it in the trash if there's a wrong name on it. It cannot win any top award. It means it doesn't get the blue, it doesn't get the orange, and it doesn't get horticultural excellence. So you've got to know your name. You can look it up at home, keep your labels when you buy things. Don't think you're going to remember it. That picture of my front yard, I planted that all. There was nothing. When the construction people finished with our house and the last of the trucks were gone, a friend of mine who's a landscaper on the Cape stopped by and he went, "You're going to have to take out 18 inches." Because one, they had pulled up the stumps of a lot of pine trees, and in doing so, they had brought a lot of rocks up. And two, there had been trucks sitting out there for 2, 4, 5, 6 months. So, you know, all through the winter and everything. We ended up, the guy who we hired to actually do that came in and said, "I'm going to take out 12 inches and then we'll take a look at it." He wasn't at the house an hour and he came back and said, "We're taking out 18 inches. We took out 947 cubic yards and brought in 950 cubic yards. So I know all about my soil. Use an address label, fill it out in advance. Even if you need to make a change when you're there, if you bring it in with it filled out, you will be less panicked, you'll be more at ease, it'll be easier for them to help you. Do it in advance. If you don't have the entry card, and I bet they'll give them to you well in advance, they make them inviolable, then just take a piece of paper and write all that information down on it for each of your plants. Because if you don't have that information at your fingertips, you're going to turn to the horticulture people and you're going to ask them, and it's not their job to figure out what your plant is. They've got 40, 50, maybe 60 people there entering things. They cannot do that for you. So do it yourself in advance. Now, I've done it in advance and actually had a really good horticultural person say to me, "That's not butter and sugar, that's buttercream," or whatever. And I look at them in kind of amazement, particularly my hostas, and go, "Okay." And I put down what they tell me. Because if I was right and the people came back to them and said, "Is that right?" And they said, "No, we told her it was buttercream." I don't want that to happen. Put down what they say it is, unless you are absolutely positive that they have no idea of what they're talking about. Double check everything before you hand it in. Once again, if this little card is screwed up, it screws up your chances of getting a top award. It sounds so stupid and so simple, but that day you'll be nervous and anxious. So if you do it in advance at home, you're in much better shape. Your bottles for anything that you bring in, will there be bottles supplied or are they supplying their own? Bottles supplied or are they supplying their own?
We have Perrier, which are light green.
Oh, okay.
So we will have them, hopefully we'll have enough.
Okay. If they say that to you, we hope there will be enough. That is a good hint that if you've got some plain bottles at home, salad dressing bottles, water bottles, whatever. Bring a few along with you. They will love you if they've run short. And if they haven't, you just put them back in your car and take them home again. I have a collection of bottles in my basement. Bottles always have to be clean. If they give you a dirty bottle, you take it out and back and rinse it and make sure it's clean, because the judges will look at a dirty bottle and it distracts from your specimen. This is not the world's best bottle because it's got this, but it is clear, so it qualifies. It also has a nice clear spot right in here so the judges can see the stem, which they always want to do. There is no excuse whatsoever for any dirt on the outside of your bottle, or for that matter, your plant. You never, ever, ever show something dirty. And by dirt, I also mean salt stains, where the salts come through, or there's salt stains on the edge. You don't do that. Judges get down to the point of having 3 perfect specimens in front of them that have got them all totally convinced this is the best piece of horticulture they've ever seen. That's when they get to the point of saying, wait, there's some dirt in the bottom of that bottle. I'm not kidding. You gotta find something to differentiate them. There's salt stains on the side of that pot. That is something the exhibitor has complete control over. You can scrub that pot before you leave home. You can scrub it when you get to the show if you suddenly notice another stain. You can take care of that. Don't ever let a judge mark you down for something you can control. You can't control that this bent twice, and so it doesn't have perfect pose, but you can control how clean your pot is, or your jar, or whatever. If I go to put this in, I'm going to use the daffodils. If I go to put this in this jar, and I'm going to have to add a little more water. The stem always should be in water. Okay. And that one actually got a little too much. So, okay. If I put this in here, it's going to go like that, and this one's going to go like that. And they don't look very good because they don't have a pose. But in the show world, you can take something inconspicuous like plastic wrap that you've rolled into a little rope, and you can wrap it around the stem. And you can shove it into the bottle to hold your stem up so that when the judge, there's not enough there. That's why I brought multiple pieces. So that when the judge takes a look at it, the judge is seeing it the way you want it posed. This one isn't posed. This one you can pose exactly the way you want it. And when you don't put it down on the tables where it's exhibited, but the people who do will always make sure that if you've got it standing way, that's facing where the judges will be looking at it from. And with this, they'll do their best, but it's not going to stay in one position. The other thing is, if you bring something from home, don't bring that pretty vase which looks so cute on your table, because you can't do anything with it, and it's just going to do whatever it wants in there, and somebody's going to walk by, and by the time the judges gets there, it's going to look like that. And I think we've all seen that at some point, right? I mean, where it just got moved, and it was no one's fault. You can't control it in something that size. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, clear bottle. Properly filled, yes, it should be filled so the stem is well underwater. Properly staged. This one isn't, this one is. Do you have any questions about that? Yes? That would be up to your committee. Usually it's glass. One of the problems with plastic, it wouldn't make difference with daffodils, but if I stuck this in it, I guarantee you it wouldn't stay upright. Somebody would walk by it and fall over. Your loss if you brought the plastic bottle. Okay, too much wedging. Every so often you get there and you see somebody who has really made sure they got a lot of plastic wrap. And they stuck it in there like this. And I'm sorry, it looks like what I discarded from my sandwich. And the judge doesn't want to see that. The judge wants this nice, neat little plug, which is down out of sight for the most part. They don't want to see that. Don't try wrapping it like a sandwich, okay? Just let it be. And this one, once again, the ornate bottle distracts, and the mouth is so wide, there's no way you could ever stage it. It's always going to be off where it wants to be. Okay. Wedged and unwedged. I'll move these two over here. And yeah, this is the one. Unwedged. That's the best I can do, is prop it against the side. Even if this were full of water. And this is a kind of heavy bottle. This is actually an antique milk bottle. But I didn't want to bring a light one because I wanted to do this and I didn't want to risk any of that. And, you know, I'm sorry, but that just doesn't say much to the judges. When they look at it, they're not going to get a good view of it. They're not going to see it in its full glory. You're looking mostly at this front flower. This one looks, but if you turn it up like that, they can all add something to it. And that's where, once again, your wedging can come in. I don't think I have enough in there. But you get the idea. It stands up straight like that, and you get to see it in its full glory. Now, if I were at the show with this, I wouldn't leave this back one on. Would you, Sandra? Okay. That's because the back one is going to always be in the back because you want them to look at that part, and it's distracting. And so you just bring your clippers, cut it off nice and sharply right up against the stem, and now there's nothing distracting. Now you've got this straight up and down. Now, granted, on the bush, this grows like this. Doesn't matter. Judges want to see it like this. They want to see it upright in front of them so they can look at it clearly. And I'll tell you, this is a miracle of miracles, because here we are in February. Every leaf on this one is just about perfect. There are no holes, there's no damage up here. This really is a very nice specimen, particularly after I take off this piece of bird feather. Look your specimens over carefully, really carefully, because judges see things. They really do. I'm always astounded by, I think I've looked at something really, really well, and another judge will say, isn't that a piece of bird feather there? Yeah. Once again, when you get it down to a few specimens, you're really looking at them carefully. You want to make sure you're giving it to the best one. And when you're looking at the top awards, you're looking at not just one group, you're looking at bunches of groups. And it's really, really hard to get it down to that top award. And that's when they get so picky. And even as a judge, I'm thinking, God, we're being so picky. No one in the world will ever see that except us, because we're in there doing this, looking for the one that is absolutely perfect. You don't have to be absolutely perfect to win, but sometimes you do. Yes?
What about where you cut?
Yes.
You made the cut.
Yes.
Doesn't that leave you said before about they'll know you cut it?
Well, you mean this one? You mean this one in back?
Yes, where you cut that.
First of all, it's going to go inside the jar. They're never going to see it. Secondly, it's in back, it's low. It's when you make a cut that sticks out at them. If I cut this front one off, there'd be no way of hiding it. You'd see that. And I'll show you that on another piece I've got here. Does this fit the schedule? In your schedule, it says a branch of 30 inches to the apical tip. Now, the apical tip is where this plant really was growing to. And when you look at it, you see this. Now, I'm making it real easy for you to see that. But you know this is not the top because it comes from down here, and the main branch was still growing up. the person who had this took this off because it didn't look very good. It was bent, it was whatever. Or there was something wrong with it. This doesn't meet the definition of what a branch has to be. A branch has to come to a natural end. It can't be a cut off piece. Now, this is a branch, this is a branch, this is a branch. But if you've got a long branch and you've trimmed something out of it, it no longer qualifies. Now, if you took out a little tiny thing over here that was broken, that's not a deal. But when you've cut off a big thing, you've changed the branch into something it wasn't. Okay? And it sometimes will say 30 inches to the apical tip. Now, I always cut everything long because you can always cut more off, but it's really hard to glue any back on. So I keep my little 36-inch thing so I can make sure that I have got the 36 inches or 30 inches usually that I need. It sounds dumb. It's really easy to pack. It doesn't take much room, and it makes you certain that you've met the requirements on this. Okay? I'm getting some awful looks out there.
Can I ask a question?
Certain.
A judge ever move a piece of horticulture?
A judge cannot touch the horticulture, however, they can ask the clerks, the people who are there to help, to pick up a piece of horticulture. Say, I can't see this, and I want to see is the spathe still on the back? I can ask the clerk to pick it up and show me. To be honest, most judges will just lean over and look. You're supposed to judge everything from in front, but sometimes, you do that. It's not cheating to have them pick it up and move it. Once again, you're looking to see if somebody has either accidentally or maybe not so accidentally made a change to what they're showing you. I mean, it's human nature. This will look so much better if I take that off. Yeah. If you, oh good, I've got one. I didn't know if these would even make it here. So, yes, my little tiny bottle. I was a chemist. I used to save these, not knowing what I was going to do with them. Actually, I used to use them on the table to put sauce on because they could go in the microwave. This is in terrible shape. I cut this out of my garden this morning. This is a ginger leaf. This is American ginger, the native ginger. You would never put this in a show, but I just wanted to show you that little tiny pieces, you can put them like that. You can put them like that. The judges are not going to rate that down because it's too small for the vase, because they just know that you didn't have this size thing. But if you have something like that, you can bring it along. It makes it look even better. This is a heuchera leaf I took out of my yard this morning. This has to be the strangest winter. Most of my yard has that much water standing on it right now. Has everybody got that? I mean, it keeps raining and snowing and melting, but the ground underneath is frozen, so the water doesn't go anywhere. So I've got these things that are still showing. And you show them like this. Now, if this were mine, I would not let it fall down in there. I would take some of this and stick it in here very neatly, because I don't want any judge to say, what a mess. So that mine was sticking up and it was looking the judges right in the eye. Because you want the judges to say, oh, that's a beautiful little specimen. How did she ever have something like that in February? Wow. I was more shocked than you are, I will tell you. I couldn't believe. I thought this would be about the best thing I found out there, and then I saw this. So things are doing amazingly well. So with the apial tip missing, this wouldn't qualify. So if you have any questions, call up the person who wrote the schedule or the person in charge of horticulture and ask them, what does it mean by an apial tip? Because if you don't have the apial tip, this thing, where it naturally stopped growing, it's not going to count. Don't take this in. The judges will say, what was she doing? But I had so little to choose from.
So, excuse me,
Yes.
so if that's flipped over, would you be able to pick it up and take measurement, or is it?
No, it's in here, and what you can do is this, and get a pretty close idea about whether it's there.
Doesn't have to be this.
No, it doesn't. You want to position it so it looks its best. And judges are pretty good. And if it's 31 inches, they're not going to go bananas, particularly if it's got a big curve in it or something. I've seen branches that literally do this. I mean, we've all seen them, and it's a beautiful branch, but it's done something, so it's hard to really know how long it is. Do I measure it from here to here? Do I measure it, So, but make sure it's in that realm. Don't show up, and don't show up with a 40-inch branch and say, I can't cut the bottom off, that's important. No, it doesn't work. You've got to make sure it meets that 30-inch criteria. If it's 28 inches, that doesn't matter. But you've got to make sure it meets that 30-inch criteria.
It's from the stem, bottom, not from the bottom of the bottle.
No, it's not from the bottom of the bottle. It's from where the stem ends. Okay? All right, your containers for potted plants. First thing, make sure your container is clean. This is once again something you have 100% control over. Now this is a really ugly black plastic container, which by the way isn't clean. It's got an old label on it still. This is Nephilisis obliterata Kimberly Queen. That's the full legal name. That's Betty June Burgess Sanders, okay? This is a cute little fern. And if you've got a fern category, this is nice. There's nothing wrong with it. If I position it this way for you to look at, it's pretty well situated in the pot. If I position it this way, you'll say, it's all on one side. So I don't know if you will allow this in your show. They do in all horticultural shows now. The exhibitor can put an X on the back. Use a little chalk mark, put an X on the back to tell them you want it positioned that way. So it's best side according to you is showing. If you enter the Boston Flower Show, they ask you to put an X on the back. So you put the side you want out. And they pay attention to that. Now, if I were to show that, I wouldn't show it in that black pot with the junk on the back. I would at least put it in a second pot, which is a dark green. It looks good. It's not flashy. It's not going to do anything. And I'm sorry, I've got a broken leaf here. That happened on the way. And that's going to look, that's fine. What you don't want to do, and you see a lot of this, unfortunately, at flower shows, you don't want to put it in this. This is a really cute pot. I'd use it in my house. Don't pot something you want to take to the show in it. Judges do not want to see decorated pots. They don't want to see white pots. They don't want to see bright yellow, red, blue, purple. They want to see terracotta or black or dark green. Is that? You're not nodding, so I'm worrying about you over there. They want to see that because they don't want the pot to take their attention away from the plant. This, you're only going to look at the plant. This, you're only going to look at the plant. This, you're going to look at the pot.
And it's too big.
Well, it's too big, but I didn't have one that I could fit this into that was anywhere near the sort of thing I want. I don't have a lot of pots like that anymore. This is my, oops, everybody come out of there. This is my trick for bringing pots, particularly if you're bringing a ceramic pot, but also pots like this. And that is that I take newspaper, I take a double sheet of newspaper, and I twist it. So it's like a rope. I put it around the pot, and I use tape to hold them together until I have a nice thing that sits around it and protects it. Because on the way there, you're going to hit a pothole. You're going to have to go over a speed bump. You don't want your pots banging together. You don't want to go in and find out that your beautiful terracotta pot has a chipped edge on it. Because it's not your fault, but it's a controllable element, and so judges note it. They don't automatically take points off, but they note it. And it's not something you want to see because it's controllable. If you don't have newspaper, if you saved any of the styrofoam from stuff at Christmas time, if you get things packed in foam from Amazon or whatever, save those pieces and wrap them around things. You look very confused.
No, I'm paying attention.
Okay. It just saves damage, and you don't want damage on the way there. Furthermore, if it's a cold day, don't expect your plant to put on its long johns because it doesn't own any. And instead, what I do is I take my plant. Now, if I worked in a supermarket, I'd just swipe some of those wraps, but I don't. So I take my plant, I tape it together up here, I tape it together here, I pull this in and I tape it together there. Would that protect it if I walk down the street on a 5-degree day? No. Will that protect it getting out of my car and straight into the building? Yes. And that makes a big difference. It's worth the extra couple of minutes it takes. And if you don't subscribe to newspapers, well, there's got to be some paper around your house of some kind. Or find a neighbor who does subscribe to newspapers. I subscribe to 3. I always have newspaper. Neil and I are the last of the dinosaurs. We're out there subscribing to 3 newspapers. Well, actually, I kind of did here. That's when I took, this does not want to stay in there. When I took the not so attractive with the gunk on it and put it in a second pot, that is double potting. Now, if the double pot doesn't fit nice and tight like this does, what you can do is you can take a little bit of top covering. You can put, I like to put sphagnum moss down in there. You can put potting soil down in there around it so it doesn't slide in there, it stays centered. And then you take something decorative, little decorative, the very fine chips, not white or colored aquarium gravel, black or brown, gravel out of your driveway. If you've got real fine pea gravel in your driveway or your neighbor has a pathway of it, go out and scoop up a little, put it on top. It looks fine. The judges don't mind that at all. They expect to see it sooner or later. Nothing wrong with that, but don't show that there are 2 pots in there. A very dear friend of mine in Medfield she had a plant that she had been given 7 years ago that had been grown from nothing by this man's wife, and she'd grown it into a beautiful plant, and when she passed away, he said, I'll never be able to take care of it. Will you take it? So she took it, and it was a very unusual succulent, and it had gotten huge. And she said, the pot looks terrible, but I don't dare take it out of this pot just before a show. What do I do? So I went over to her house, and we took a larger pot. It was in terracotta. Succulents really need to be in something like terracotta that breathes. This is glazed, it won't breathe. If I've got something like this, it likes to stay wet. It's happier in a glazed pot or a plastic pot, but your succulents and your cacti, they like pots that breathe. And we put it down in that pot. We stuffed stuff around the edge, and then we put a very fine brown gravel over the top of it. And she won not only a blue ribbon, but also a President's Choice at the flower show. And she was the happiest lady, and she called up the person who gave it to her, and he came over to see all the ribbons because he was happy that his mother's plant had gotten recognized. So, it's wonderful to do that. Yes?
I have a question about wrapping.
Yes.
Does a basket wrap work just as well, or does it have to be newspaper?
Basket wrap is often plastic. It's a form of plastic. Plastic transmits cold very quickly. The newspaper doesn't. And if it's really cold, a couple of layers of newspaper. But the problem with plastic is that it transmits the cold, and just in a few minutes, a couple minutes of cold can make that leaf tip go brown. And now your perfect specimen isn't perfect anymore. And that hurts. Everybody been there? I keep looking over at the ladies I know who are judges. And anybody been there? Because we all learned. So make sure your pot is clean of salts or dirt. Do that at home. Don't take it to the show and think you're going to have time to do 8 pots. Take it at home. I use a plastic scrubber. You buy them at the supermarket for Teflon pots and such. I use that and I scrub my pot to get any salt or anything like that off it, any dirt, and make sure it's really clean before I leave. Then when I get there, I take a damp paper towel and I wipe it off again. Why? Because you never know what, you might have gotten dirty fingers and you picked it up and now there's a dirt smudge on it. It's not a big deal. It doesn't take a long time. But do as much as you can at home, and then at the last minute, go over it before you hand it over to be judged. You should see these people, and me, when we're doing a floral arrangement. You're standing there and they're going, 2 minutes, ladies, and you're going, no. Make sure your pot is appropriate to the size of the plant. You don't want a little tiny plant in a great big pot. Just like you wouldn't put one daffodil in the great big vase. It would look stupid. It would look sad. You want the pot to be appropriate to the size. And if you're thinking that you should up-pot the plant, it's getting big and you should up-pot it, and it's only a month until the flower show, I wouldn't do it. I'd leave it in that pot because it's better that it looks so healthy that it's growing out of the pot than it looks like you just put it into a pot. And sometimes in the process of repotting something, you also break some roots or something and suddenly the plant's going, oh, I got a problem down here. Don't do it. Plant centered in the container. You don't want your plant sitting all to one side or all to the other side. It looks like you've got too big a container. Even if you needed that big a container because of the root mass. You may have had a huge root mass and you needed that size container. Make sure the plant ends up in the middle. And if you're repotting it now when you've got several months until your flower show, you can trim some of that root mass off if it's keeping it all to one side. And then just stuff lots of potting mix in there and make sure it's centered. By the way, don't go crazy over the potting mixes. There's potting mix for African violets. There's potting mix for general houseplants. There's potting mix for ferns. There's potting mix for cacti. All right, cacti sort of need a special potting mix. But you don't have to go crazy about it. I use the same potting mix I use in my outdoor containers in the summer. I buy it in these huge sacks. It sits in my garage. This time of year, I go out, I get some, I bring it in, I let it warm up to room temperature, then I trim. If I'm potting a succulent or a cactus that needs really good drainage, I go out to the pot of sand I have out there and I take a scoop of sand and I mix it into that soil. That's really enough. The only thing that I really go out of my way for are orchids. If I'm repotting an orchid, I buy the real tiny bark chips like that size and I mix those up with a little bit of potting soil and put it in. Orchids don't like soil. Naturally, they grow in a crook in the tree with whatever landed there. They don't want to sit in a hard mass of soil. They want the air flowing around their roots. So they want those bark chips in there to make it easy for them to do so. No salt or dirt on the pot. Please don't do that. Every judge will tell you that there's been some time when she's gone, God, I hate to mark this down. I have to. Small plants in large pots or vice versa. We've all seen pictures of plants that literally are falling out of their pot. You should have repotted it a couple of months ago. Once again, there are exceptions to that. There are exceptions because of the kind of plant or some such. But as a rule, you don't want it to look uncomfortable in the pot. You know, I do not own any 6-foot-inch heels because I would be like this. And you don't want your plant to look like that. Okay. Clay pots or neutral color pots. Not decorated or shiny or white or bold colors. And if your granddaughter painted a really cute picture on it, don't tell her you didn't take it to the show. Put it aside, put it back in that when you get home, and tell her how much you love it, and that's wonderful. Use anything you use on the top to make the top look clean and good. Now this was potted not all that long ago, so the top looks real nice. It's just nice, clean potting soil, no problem. But if your top looked bad, and sometimes it does, and particularly if you've got an older cactus or an older succulent or an older orchid or something like that, you might have a top of the soil that doesn't look good. You can use fresh soil sprinkled over the top. You can use those dark colored gravel, something unobtrusive, little pea gravel that you swipe out of your neighbor's yard, whatever. But don't go buy aquarium gravel. It just looks horrible. I do not want to see purple underneath a cactus. I don't want to see blue underneath a fern. I mean, you're supposed to be looking at the plant, and anything that takes your eye away from the plant is a bad thing, whether it's a brightly colored pot or a brightly covered gravel or anything like that. Anything that takes your eye away from the plant is a bad thing. Okay? You're all looking so serious. Come on, everybody smile now for 1 minute. Come on. Okay. Properly potted. Now this looks like it's a little too big for it, but if you know this is a croton, and crotons grow like this. This one's got 3 huge branches. And this is mine. This won a blue ribbon in Boston 2 years ago. And they're woody branches, and they tend to go out, to have 3 of them going out at angles in a pot like this. So there's nothing wrong with the fact that it's bigger than the pot. And that is in a plastic pot. It used to be in a terracotta one. It's in a plastic pot because it got too heavy for me to pick up and carry around. There's nothing wrong with that. But you notice the plastic is terracotta colored. If you move to something like that, you want it to look unobtrusive. You don't want to look at it. And make sure the size is appropriate to the pot. You know, this is appropriate to the pot. Now, I bought this little guy the other day, and he's perfectly lined up. He's got a dead leaf in here, so before he can go to the show, that dead leaf is... Oh, always take to the show with you a pair of pruners, particularly if you have any woody stuff. And these are flower scissors, but these are my old flower scissors. They're not good enough for cutting a flower for a design, but they are perfect for reaching down in there and cutting this and getting this out of there without leaving any sign that I cut anything, which is good. If I put this in this pot, this would just look ridiculous. I mean, doesn't it? But you see that. You see people have potted things up. It was in too small a pot, and they didn't have something the right size. You got lots of time. Take a look. Get something for the right size. Call a friend. You got a pot about 6 inches across? I guarantee you somebody will say, yes. I could have a sale. I probably have 100 terracotta pots in my garage. My husband's waiting for the day. I promised him when we moved, we built a new house 4 years ago, that I was going to downsize all my stuff. I downsized lots of things. I got rid of 2 full rooms of furniture. I moved to a smaller house. But before they finished, I had the guys build me 5 shelves, each 25 feet long, just to hold my flower show stuff in the basement. And my husband said, I thought we were going to downsize that. I said, but it's neater. Your pot has suffered neglect if it looks like that. And you all know what happened. It was sitting on that table with 4 other plants, and 3 of them were bigger than it was, and you never noticed it when you watered it, that it was getting like this. So remember, rotate your plants regularly. Every time I water, I give every plant a quarter turn, because you don't want it going off like that. You just can't enter that in a show. It just doesn't belong there. And you don't want to cut off that whole branch because then you've got too small a plant. So, make sure you do what you have to do. Every time you water, if you've got windows, if you've got overhead lights, you don't have that problem. But I just use windows. I grow everything in windows. So I have to make sure I keep turning plants all the time. Okay, cute pot. This was a gift. Someone gave it to me. Isn't it adorable with all those bugs on it? Doesn't it look stupid? You don't look at the hyacinth first. You look at the pot first. That means you don't want it. And the other thing is, in this case, the flowers are lopsided in the pot. They're all to one side. Yes. Okay. Just think about it before you do it. And if you're thinking, everybody will think that's cute, call up a friend. And ask a friend to come over and say, don't you think that's cute? And if she's a real friend, she'll say, I think it's a really cute pot, but. And when she says but, just smile and say, thank you, I needed that.